Filibuster is the suggestion from Senator Warren about how to pass the minimum wage. But there are ways to raise the minimum wage without using a budget reconciliation bill or getting rid of the Senate filibuster, because that's the way the minimum wage has always been raised, without using budget reconciliation and without getting rid of the Senate filibuster. And we are joined tonight by a master of the Senate to help guide us through the options. Leading off our discussion tonight, Jim Manley, a 21-year veteran of the United States Senate who served as an advisor to Majority Leader Harry Reid and to the chairman of the Senate Labor Committee, Senator Ted Kennedy. Also with us, Jason Johnson, professor of politics and journalism at Morgan State University. He is an MSNBC political analyst and host of the new podcast, A Word with Jason Johnson, for Slate. Jim, let's begin with the Senate options. The get rid of the filibuster, which has become kind of the easy throwaway line, that we already know is impossible because Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema have said they absolutely will not vote to do that. But I've outlined why trying to get this into reconciliation won't work, because Mitch McConnell can strip it out with an amendment if you did overrule the parliamentarian. The last time the minimum wage was raised, it was just squeezed into a defense spending bill at the last minute, and that's the kind of way, that's the way it was done in the past, is just stuck onto must-pass bills that then Republicans vote for. And in fact, the last time they raised it, George Bush was president, 2007, Republican presidents signed it because it was inside a giant bill with military funding in it.
Well, I just so happened to be working for Senator Kennedy, the author of that last minimum wage bill, when we did this. And it's a little bit more complicated than that. I mean, you know, we begin with the premise that he spent more than a year stalking the Senate floor, looking for attempts to offer amendments to raise the minimum wage. I put together more press conferences than thought humanly possible, designed to try and highlight the need to get it done. And then at some point, and we were dealing with a guy by the name of John Boehner, who at that point in time was the chairman of the Educational Workforce Committee, who was dead set against doing anything on the minimum wage. But when push comes to shove, he was offered a compromise that included tax breaks for small business. God, Kennedy hated that idea because we'd never done it before, but that's the art of compromise. That's what it takes to try and get things done. So for the life of me, your opening segment, you nailed it correctly. I mean, none of these options being discussed are going to work. All of them end up being losing, some more than others. So, yes, let's get Senator Manchin in the room. Let's get Republicans in the room. Let's try and figure out a compromise. And if they can't do it, let's blame them. But first of all, we got to take the first step and put the onus on these guys to deliver. And I'm talking about Senator Manchin as well.
Mm-hmm. Jason Johnson, so Ron Klain said last Wednesday to Joy Reid, no, we're not going to overrule the Senate parliamentarian. And that is a White House call, because it would be Vice President Harris who would have to do it, sitting in the presiding officer's chair. Then the White House says again today, Jen Psaki, we're not going to do that. They couldn't be more clear. And yet, members of the House of Representatives continue to say, overrule the parliamentarian. What's going on? Is there a communication disconnect here?
Lawrence, I have to say, as your other guest mentioned, your opening was brilliant. It was brilliant, because I think there's some basic civics and government classes that certain members of Congress have not followed up on. This is a little bit beyond Schoolhouse Rock, right? At the end of the day, you have sort of people in the House. And again, the House is supposed to be that. Philosophically, the House is the rabble. It's the passion. It's the people. Do it, do it, do it. The Senate is the deliberative body. And at the end of the day, yes, they could try and get rid of the filibuster. That's not going to work. Manchin and Sinema don't want that to happen. If you fire the Senate parliamentarian, as you said, Mitch McConnell will just say no, and then you'll have an embarrassing vote to yank the minimum wage out. You can't blow everything up right here, right now on this particular issue. And quite honestly, Lawrence, long term, I actually think this works for Democrats. They can keep fighting for the $15 minimum wage for the next year and a half and blame it on Republicans all they want. passing this bill now is the immediate relief that people need, and fighting for the $15 minimum wage, which, by the way, has passed in many states throughout the country, is still an issue they can fight for. I think this is sort of a short-term thinking by really passionate, well-intentioned people in the House of Representatives who may not understand the long-term strategy that might be at play in the Senate.
Well, some of them have said, and I get this, that that the moment with the parliamentarian hasn't happened until it happens. And so we're going to continue to lobby on this right up until the moment when the parliamentarian's moment on the Senate floor happens and Vice President Harris has that decision to make. So I get, I think, why they are continuing to put this pressure on, even though the White House has said they're not going to do it. But we are definitely going to have a vote on the Senate floor on the minimum wage. And Bernie Sanders has told us how. He has tweeted tonight, this week, as part of the reconciliation bill, I will be offering an amendment to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. And Jim, this is exactly the way we would expect this to play in the Senate. Chuck Schumer won't have the minimum wage in the bill that he brings to the floor because he knows how the parliamentarian's going to rule. And so what will happen is there will be this Sanders amendment offered, and it will take 50 votes to pass it, plus Vice President Harris's vote if they can get there, and that'll tell you right there if the Democrats can do it.
Yep, absolutely, and to that I'd say it's about damn time somebody figured out the strategy. Just try and move the amendment process. It piggybacks off. So I'm glad that Senator Sanders made this announcement tonight, but it piggybacks off of what I tried to say earlier, what Kennedy did. It doesn't have to be a one-off. This can be the beginning of, as Jason suggested, a series of pressure tactics designed to try and put Republicans on the defensive and try and figure out a way to try and cut a deal. Maybe it's not going to be the 15, maybe it's going to be 12.50 or whatever, again, paired with tax breaks for the wealthy. But again, I was encouraged that Senator Sanders made this announcement tonight, and and I can only hope it's going to be the first of many attempts to try and put Republicans in a very difficult position, because after all, this is a pretty popular position in many states of trying to vote against the minimum wage increase, just like it used to happen.
Yeah, and Jason, I think the House members by this time know what they're dealing with and what their likelihood is down to in the 1% range of overruling the parliamentarian. But at this stage of the argument, that seems to be the best way for them to kind of keep this discussion alive, which is the House way of putting pressure on senators. They're hoping that somehow they're going to deliver some kind of pressure to Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema.
Yeah, and this is actually the smart thing to do. Some of this is a lack of understanding, but like I said, some of this is the House's job. There needs to be a minimum wage increase in the United States of America. Just period, right? Minimum wage today, it's lost, 18% of its value since the last minimum wage increase. We are in the middle of a pandemic where people have lost hundreds of thousands of jobs and whole families are being supported by one person on minimum wage. I mean, there is a legitimate urgency here. But the House's best option is to continue to pressure. And even if they throw out unrealistic ideas, it's part of a larger, I think, pressure on Joe Biden to say, look, incrementalism is not going to get us out of this COVID mess. OK, Donald Trump was not an incrementalist. He tore down everything to push through whatever policies he wanted. And I think Democrats across the board want to see that kind of bold action from Joe Biden. So on that end, I can never disagree with people who want Joe Biden to make big moves in the face of a once-in-a-century crisis that this country is facing.
And Jim, before we go, I just want to say I can remember Senator Kennedy. It was a lonely quest in those days, trying to get attention to the minimum wage. Even Democrats thought they had bigger things to deal with, and it was very, very hard to do it. Here we have a visibility that I'm not sure the minimum wage increase has had in decades. This is an urgency level and a visibility we haven't seen before. We're going to find out what that's worth politically going forward. Jim Manley, Professor Jason Johnson, thank you very much for starting us off tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Lawrence.